Thanks, Trevor. Thanks to everyone for coming out. Let's just get started. I wanted to start by giving you sort of a landscape, an overview of the landscape of where we are, just in a broad sense. I think it's safe to say that we are now in the era of mega hacks. Between OPM, Sony, the Ashley Madison hack that just happened, and several others, that seems to be what's really going on. Just massive, large targets targeted by increasingly sophisticated players, including state-based players. China, Russia, Israel, several other countries are big players in the same space, including the United States government, by the way. Generally, what's going on is espionage. This is not cyber war. This is not we're hacking the air traffic control system and making planes fall out of the sky. This is not we're taking down the electricity grid. This is we're collecting information that can be useful for geopolitical reasons. If we ever get to the point where there's planes falling out of the sky because of cyber attacks, we probably also will have missiles flying, and it'll be very bad. So it's not, when you hear the cyber war rhetoric, that's not what's actually happening right now. It's more espionage. And the US government is, I would say, particularly vulnerable right now to these attacks. So let's talk about the OPM hack. The Office of Personnel Management was hacked. Credentials were acquired on May 7th, 2014. The hackers exfiltrated data in two separate periods. One was in July and August of 2014, and the other one was in December from a different server in 2014. And about 22 million current and former federal employees' data was compromised. And I was one of those whose data was compromised. I'm a former Commerce Department employee, and I got a letter from OPM saying, you know, your data, background check data, et cetera, has been compromised. So yay for me. And so this hack was discovered on April 15th, 2015, when a commercial vendor came in to OPM and offered to do a demo of their software for network security. And they ran their tools and they found, hey, we have this suspicious traffic, and it took about a week to confirm that that it was a serious attack. And so 22 million employees' data, that is a massive hack, right? That's 7% or so of the US population in one hack. So it's a massive hack, but it is not unprecedented or isolated that the federal government is getting hacked. So here's a chart that my colleagues Andrea Castillo and Rizky Rostmak put together with me. And the vertical axis here is thousands of reported information security incidents. Under FISMA, the Federal Information Security Management Act, federal agencies are required to report when they experience a cybersecurity incident. And so in fiscal 14, there were 70,000 such incidents reported. So you're talking about on the order of about 200 incidents a day getting reported. Many thousands of those along the bottom in the shaded area reflect instances where personal information was lost. So personal information about employees, about citizens, stuff that could be used, in some cases to blackmail people. Really bad for national security for that to happen. So on average, about 36% of the attacks do implicate some sort of personal information. And these are the agencies that have experienced the most vulnerabilities in fiscal 14. So NASA, the Veterans Administration, HHS, SSA, and then it starts getting a little scary. DOD, DOJ, Treasury, DHS is up there. So this is pretty serious business. The number of these information security incidents. So, what should we do to solve this problem? We hear different solutions proposed. So, one, should we spend more money just, fixing things, whatever that means? Should we do a cybersecurity sprint, which we actually completed over the summer? That's the term that the Obama administration used for what they were going to do to respond to the OPM attack. Do we need an information sharing program of the kind that is proposed in CISA? Or should we do something else? So let's look at each of these in turn. Spending. So this chart is unfortunately a little unclear because of the way that spending is reported on cybersecurity. But the bars indicate the levels of spending with two discontinuities. So fiscal 06 to fiscal 09 is all the same measure. Fiscal 10 to fiscal 12 is all the same measure. And then the definition changes again in fiscal 13. And so you can see it's increasing between fiscal 06 and 09. You can see it's increasing between fiscal 10 and fiscal 12. And it's increasing between fiscal 13 and fiscal 14. So the trajectory is definitely upward trajectory of spending. But yet you also see the number of incidents that we have reported also going up. So we have been spending more to address cybersecurity concerns, and we've had more than a tenfold increase in the last decade of cybersecurity incidents at the federal level. So much more spending, many more incidents. So it's not clear that just spending more is going to solve this problem. We probably can't just bolt on a new program that spends more to fix it. How about the cybersecurity sprint? So again, the Obama administration, after the OPM hack, they discovered it in April. In June, I believe it was, President Obama issued an order saying, okay, all of you agencies, you need to get together, and for 30 days, we're just going to do very little but improve our cybersecurity capabilities. And so one measure of compliance with federal cybersecurity standards is the use of strong authentication. So two-factor authentication. So if you have, many of you, I assume, for work have two-factor authentication for your Senate and House emails. If not, you can get it on your Gmail account, Facebook account. Multi-factor authentication exists and is everywhere. So before the sprint, several agencies had no multi-factor authentication at all. So NASA had no multi-factor authentication. Labor had no multi-factor authentication. HUD, SBA, et cetera. After the cybersecurity sprint, the 30-day sprint, where they worked very hard to improve their cybersecurity, they were only, no agency was in perfect compliance with even just that narrow mandate to improve their authentication capabilities. So, NASA had pretty massive improvement. Labor had pretty massive improvement. Department of Education went down, did worse after the sprint, as did the Department of Justice and the Department of Energy. And other agencies, much more modest gains. State Department and USAID had much more modest gains after the sprint. So this is percent compliance. There's a federal standard that was included, I believe, in the order that mandated this cybersecurity sprint, and these are the numbers produced by the report that followed up on the sprint. So these are federal government numbers, not stuff that we calculated. So that brings us to information sharing, which is what is on the table in Congress right now. So this has a long history going back to CISPA, the Cyber Intelligence Security and Protection Act, Sharing and Protection Act, introduced in 2011. It had a lot of provisions that gave a lot of heartache to civil libertarians in terms of the government collecting more information and using it for things unrelated to cybersecurity. So that has seems to have gone away. Now we have CISA, the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, which was introduced last year. And civil libertarians are still concerned. There's still a lot in the bill. The information that is collected about malware and that incidentally is reported about individuals can be used for other criminal justice purposes, explicitly in the bill. It can still be used to prosecute violent felonies and other things. So this is, a lot of people are concerned that this is a way to get around a warrant requirement, to go before a judge and get a warrant to investigate. So I want to ask maybe a different question than a lot of civil libertarian groups have raised, which is, would information sharing even work? Would this actually improve our cybersecurity posture and capabilities? So information sharing programs already exist. Perhaps you've heard of the NIACC, the National Infrastructure Coordinating Center. This is from its website. It says dedicated 24/7 coordination and information sharing operations center that maintains situational awareness of the nation's critical infrastructure for the federal government. So that sounds to me like an information sharing program. So that already exists. Oh, here's another one. The NCCIC, National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center, that shares information among the public and private sectors to provide greater understanding of cybersecurity and communications situation awareness of vulnerabilities, intrusions, incidents, mitigation, and recovery actions. Again, straight from their website. That is their mission. So it sounds like another information sharing program that already exists. Here's another one, the Cyber Threat Intelligence Integration Center. This was created by executive order, so I have a quote from the order, which is available on the White House website. Oversees the development and implementation of intelligence sharing capabilities to enhance shared situational awareness of intelligence-related foreign cyber threats or related to cyber incidents affecting U.S. national interests. So those are right there, three federal cybersecurity information sharing programs that we already have. Those are not the only ones. We counted 20 federal cybersecurity information sharing and public-private partnership programs already, in addition to 42 other federal cybersecurity offices. These offices, they're duplicative. The GAO has criticized the way that the federal government has responded to cybersecurity threats by, just through duplicative and uncoordinated action. So I think it's worth asking, do we need 21 information sharing programs instead of 20? Like, why do we think that this will work when the 20 programs have not worked? And so, to me, it raises the question whether CISA is really about national information security or whether it's about wanting to be seen to do something, whether it's about the intelligence community getting more information, whether it's about them being able to try to do something about cybersecurity that doesn't implicate any of their offensive tactics. So what I hear a lot from people when I talk to them is like, well, this program wouldn't really work, and they say, well, what should we do instead? And they kind of say that as a rhetorical question, like there's no good answer of what we should do instead. So I wanted to lay out some possibilities of what we could do instead. And the first one is that we should prioritize the security of our system over signals intelligence. So our defensive capabilities, our security of our systems, instead of our ability to penetrate and capture data from other systems, potentially in other countries. There's definitely a trade-off here in terms of how secure we insist on our computers being, and how secure that makes targets in other countries. In addition, there are instances where, and this goes back to World War II when we broke the German Enigma machine. We broke their code, and then so we didn't always take defensive action, because if we always did when we intercepted a message, then they would know that we broke their code. So you see incidents like the Sony hack, where the US government was pretty sure right away that it was North Korea that did it, even when a lot of the other experts doubted it. And so how could the US government be so sure? It's probably because we were monitoring what was coming out of North Korea, and we saw what was going on, probably in real time or something like it. And so unless we start prioritizing defense versus offense, we're not going to improve our security. Another issue is this zero-day vulnerabilities. So the National Security Agency and other intelligence agencies, they often acquire on the black market or on the gray market, or they discover themselves vulnerabilities in Microsoft Windows, in Mac OS X, in iOS, in Android, in other software that's more obscure in industrial control systems and so on. So they discover these vulnerabilities, and then they make a decision about, well, are we keeping this for ourselves to exploit, or are we disclosing it to the vendor? Are we disclosing it back to Microsoft or Apple so that they can fix it? I think it's very important that the US government lean much more heavily in favor of disclosing them to the vendors and then eventually to the public that these vulnerabilities exist, so that they will be patched and so that people will know, well, we're not going to use insecure systems. I think we need to have real penalties at agencies for not complying with existing standards and practices that have been put forward by the federal government. So you need to make sure that there's perhaps budgetary penalties or something along those lines for not complying with the standards that we have set forward. Limiting the use of private contractors is another thing that I think would be very helpful. The OPM hack, the credentials were originally obtained because they came through a contractor. In this case, it was a contractor that was a foreign national in a foreign country. So not very good operational security there. And of course, the Edward Snowden leaks came through a private contractor. He was working for Booz Allen at the time. So learning to do more things in-house could potentially improve our security. There are a couple ways that the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the CFAA, really hamper our ability to do proper defense in cybersecurity. So one is that the CFAA potentially, it's open to interpretation, but it potentially can implicate people who just do security research. So if you're accessing a system that you want to test to see if it's secure, maybe you don't own it, maybe you don't have permission from the owner, but you're just kind of probing to see if it's vulnerable. Maybe you rely on it in some way, and you want to know if it's secure. Just doing that research is potentially illegal under the CFAA. Similarly, the CFAA also places in a legal gray area something else called active defense. And this is a tactic that has been used by some companies when they find themselves under attack, particularly under sophisticated attack. Active defense means using measures to confuse or hack back at the attacker. So maybe you create a file on your system that enables, that phones home, right? So they, thinking this is like a good file to steal, they steal this file, and then you can figure out where they are and who they are, and then maybe you can hack back at them. I think of this as sort of like a digital Second Amendment, you know, the ability to attack people who are attacking you. So this is in a very gray area under the currently existing CFAA, and Mercatus just released a paper about that, and I think that would be a great step forward. Supporting strong encryption is another extremely important step that Congress could take. You hear a lot of law enforcement agencies complaining about going dark in this age of encryption, that they don't have access to all the information that they need. I very much doubt that. I think that this is the golden age of collecting information. But we need to support, for critical systems and personal data, we need to support the ability to have strong encryption that hasn't been deliberately weakened by the US government. I think eliminating duplication of agencies would be a good step forward. If you have dozens of agencies all supposedly being the coordinator, that means that nobody is actually doing the coordination, right? And that nobody is actually successfully coordinating responses. And then a final thing that you know, we at Mercatus do not often advocate more federal spending, but I think that if we wanted to spend some money shoring up security for everybody, we would fund some security audits of open source software. So there's a lot of pieces of the internet and of critical infrastructure, information infrastructure, that are essentially open source products run for free, run for charity, that don't have as many eyeballs as they maybe should, that we all rely on. And when a security vulnerability gets discovered in one of those, sometimes it's a real mess. The most recent one that you may have heard of was the OpenSSL flaw, the heartbleed flaw that basically made, for a period of a couple weeks, made the entire internet pretty insecure, or you know, I would say 70% of the internet pretty insecure. And so just small time, like small potatoes grants to fund some code review, right? Some sophisticated engineers looking at the code very carefully and making sure that it's secure, I think would go a long way. So the bottom line here is that I think we need a dose of humility at the federal level. We have 70,000 federal breaches a year, and that does not put us in a very good position to have the federal government come in and be the savior for private industry, right? Come in and say, well, we're going to coordinate everything, don't worry. I think instead what we need to do is get the federal government in a good position first to get its own house in order, and then you know we can see. I think it would help private industry to see what the federal government is doing if it actually succeeded. But then we could talk about what comes next. I think we need to approach this as a very, very long-term project. This isn't going to be fixed overnight. This is not a 30-day sprint that is, you know, just in a short period of time going to fix our problems. And it needs to be a priority, not an afterthought. By that I mean, we're not going to be able to bolt on a cybersecurity program on top of what we already had. It needs to be bottom up through all of our agencies. We need to take it seriously and design our protocols and our programs to take it seriously from the start. And you know, there is no silver bullet, right? I gave you several, I think 8 ideas of what we could do. I think we need to do a pretty large combination of those. Not just, there's no like one thing that we can do and that would fix cybersecurity, and certainly not Just one information sharing program is not going to fix it. So that's it for my prepared remarks, and I'm happy to do Q&A at this point.